Well, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thanks to Assurity for the invite to come down. You know, it's been 11 years since I've been to Auckland, and it's a pleasure to be back. When I came 11 years ago, I came with Jim Highsmith. Actually, I'm going to mention him later in the speech. And we had the weekend before the conference began, and I went surfing for the first time in my life. Bethel's Beach, is that the name of it? Yes, I got that right? And that was wonderful. And then Jim and I spent the next day rappelling down a waterfall. I don't know where it was, but the whole day in wetsuits and strange sneakers, just rappelling all the way down this huge waterfall. So that was a blast. Anyway, I'm really excited to bring this topic down here, and let's get started. So any of you do sprints here? Fixed length sprints? A lot of you, okay. You ever have this experience where you're beginning the sprint and you're feeling pretty optimistic? You know, you've decided how much work you can do, and you're thinking it's going to go okay. And then a little bit later, you're not so sure. And then as things go, you're getting beaten up a little bit, but it's, maybe we'll make it. And then towards the end of the sprint, you're not doing too well at all, and you're really not feeling too good. And finally, by the end, it's getting super ugly. And you're cutting corners. You're not doing any of those technical practices like refactoring or test-driven development. You're just getting the work done. Right? Anyone have that experience around here? Yeah, we see that. We see this quite a bit wherever we go. Other issues we see user stories that seem to have an ability to transport themselves from sprint to sprint to sprint, never getting done. You have that experience? Yeah. Gosh, what else? So these guys here said velocity is killing agility, and Ron Jeffries, who sort of invented story points, said, oops, sorry about that. Right? Some of the older ideas kind of no longer matter, and we actually would actively like you to stop using those things. Okay? I wrote a blog back around 2012, spent a lot of time writing this. My idea was to inject sort of a knife into the heart of story points and then turn. But I think I've only maimed it. I haven't quite killed it off. So it's called Stop Using Story Points. You can read that if you like. The burger, fries, and Coke, that's what I've referred to as the Agile Happy Meal. So that is sprints, stand-ups, and story points. That's your Agile Happy Meal. It gives a lot of indigestion. Definition of done. This thing's all screwed up. And someone inside the building, some person guessing that you're done when no one's ever even used the software yet. No one even is telling you that it's good or bad or whatever. It's just, that doesn't work. So we find a lot of problems with that old idea of a definition of done inside the building. Jeff Godhelf wrote this book, Lean UX, and he said, let's get out of the deliverables business. Right? Delivering more and more stories, increasing our output. How is this actually helping our users? Is it so important for us to have a lot of features out there? Not too good. That's not real Agile. I want you to hear this guy. This is about the release process at his company.
Release rage is when you're overworked, you're already working 40 to 50 hours a week, and then on top of it, you have to do a release, which in some companies, one company I worked at, it was every Friday night. It cut into my family time. It cut into my sleep. I'd work a full day on Friday and then go home, log back in, take the train, log back in, and then start working immediately on preparing a release, getting it ready for deployment, and sometimes go to 2 o'clock in the morning, sometimes go till 6 o'clock Saturday morning, and you don't get any extra money, a pat on the back, a thank you. It's just something you're expected to do every Friday night, and it's the kind of thing that you run screaming from. And you know, my family's upset, my kids are upset. I have to lock myself literally in a little office in my home on a Friday night, and I should be spending time with my family. I should be taking them out to a movie. You know, I should be playing baseball with the kids after work, and instead I'm doing code releases. There's got to be a better way.
Poor guy, he left that job, of course. Got to be a better way. Oh, sorry. Modern Agile. So I refer to that last slide as the Donald Trump of Agile. Sorry. Promises everything and delivers on very little. So modern Agile, let's talk about this. All right. There's 4 principles in modern Agile. Now, you probably already know them because you have a sticker on your seat. Well, I hope you actually put it somewhere and read it. But here's what it says: make people awesome. You know, Agile always sort of said, the business is going to tell us what to do, and then we're going to be agile in doing it. And I think that's nonsense. I really don't like that separation, and I really think it's important for us to know what our purpose is. Our purpose in building the things we build is to make people awesome. Now, I know there's some sensitive people out there that say, you can't make anyone awesome. They have to choose to be awesome. Well, the idea here is that you're doing something, you're giving someone a tool, you're giving someone a service, a product that elevates their potential, that brings them to a higher level of capability, right? Ideally makes them awesome. That's the concept. And we want to do that for our users, but also we say make people awesome because we have coworkers, we have managers, we have stakeholders, we have all kinds of people, and we want to make all of those folks awesome, right? That's a high bar, I'll give you that, right? It's aspirational. We'll get deeper into what this means by looking at some examples, but that's make people awesome. The next item is make safety a prerequisite. This one is huge. You could have all the fancy features in your product, but if it deletes data, or if it just crashes all the time, or if it causes other kinds of problems, you're in trouble. Those features mean nothing, right? Make safety a prerequisite applies both to your product and to your culture. How safe are you to speak your mind? How safe are you to make a mistake? Make safety a prerequisite is a key to high performance. We have experiment and learn rapidly. If you have read a book like Eric Ries's Lean Startup, you'll be familiar with this concept. I should mention, too, it means experiment rapidly and learn rapidly. Do both rapidly, right? Sometimes you're just going to learn rapidly and you're not doing any experiments. Sometimes you are doing experiments in order to learn. We don't want to guess. We want to avoid guessing. As Jeff said yesterday, my God, there's so many guesses in our backlogs. We don't want guesses in our backlogs. We want, as he said, hypotheses, experiments. We want risk in there and figure out how to handle that risk. And we do that through experimenting and learning. Finally, deliver value continuously. We are living in a world where everything's becoming continuous, right? It's no longer these big phases. Even 2 weeks is an eternity for a lot of companies these days, right? Who's going to wait 2 weeks for a security patch when there's a big security hole that's just been identified? You want to release a fix immediately. Continuous deployment is a hugely important practice. Deliver value continuously, very important. Okay, so we think the future already arrived, right? A lot of the stuff I'm talking about, boy, we've been doing it for a while now. Companies that are always excelling are way ahead of us, right? So the future already arrived. We just have to catch up to it. A lot of what I'm talking about is inspired from certain thought leaders and authors. So books like Making Users Awesome from Kathy Sierra, so her book Badass. Other books on flow-based development and continuous delivery and deployment. Lean Startup, as we mentioned, and other books. There's no way for me to fit all the books in here that I could possibly recommend. I am definitely a lover of books and of wisdom. I like to say more wisdom, less process, right? There's so much wisdom for us to be leveraging. So those are some books that you can look for. The Manifesto for Agile Software Development was uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. How many of you here have found Agile moving beyond software into other fields? Just show of hands. Wow, lots of you. This was really relevant and incredibly important, right, in 2001 to issue this manifesto. But today, it's not just about software development. It's about all kinds of things, right? We find that the HR department really needs to become Agile. And there more and more of them are interested in that. Sales and marketing, more and more interested in becoming more Agile. When you write a book, how do you do it in an Agile way? All kinds of human endeavors can be Agile. So modern Agile is saying, yes, let's recognize that, and let's speak in a language which is open to many human endeavors, not just software development. We're uncovering better ways of getting awesome results. Real quick about me, I'm the founder and CEO of Industrial Logic. We go around the world helping companies sort of get better at this stuff. Now, this will be, I think Jeff will probably recognize one of these pictures here. That is the offices of Retail Aspect up there, top. We were doing a lot of extreme programming there, and that was a lot of fun. We were building software that I barely remember what it even did, but I know this: it didn't sell very well. It basically, there's a long sales cycle for that process, and they wanted to build everything first and then try to sell it, which killed them. So we had a lot of things right there with extreme programming. It was amazing, low technical debt and excellent ability to change the code, but other business practices were not as well defined and as awesome as they could have been. So I've been an Agile coach for many years. I wrote a book. I started to grapple with with doing Agile, doing extreme programming in larger contexts, large banks, for example, and started to work on ways to make it work in those large entities. I called it Industrial XP at the time. I've built a few e-learning albums to teach these skills. And then in 2013, I started talking about a word I made up. If you're a consultant, you have to invent a word every now and then. So the word is onzeneering. And onzen means safety in Japanese. It's also important to be mystical. So you pick a word from Japan, and then you're mystical, and you've invented a word, and all of a sudden, you're important. Turns out not many people really understood what the heck onzeneering was. So while I talked about it for a while, I ended up pivoting, okay? And I did a zoom out pivot. I was zoomed into this concept that safety is the most important thing, but I then had to zoom out and talk about some other stuff, which is now where we are with modern Agile. Back in 2008, I gave a speech at the Agile conference, the North American Agile conference, and started to talk about what we were doing in our product development at Industrial Logic. We build some e-learning software. And I said, what we discovered was we're no longer working in fixed length time boxes. We're working in variable length time boxes. They vary depending upon what we have to release. I called them micro releases, because we would work for half a day, release something. Work for 2 days, release something. And that's the change that we moved towards in 2008. And that meant that we were no longer using story points. We were no longer using fixed length sprints. We were just trying to find valuable work to do and ship it and repeat and maybe retrospect every now and then as well to get better, right? And that's the change that we started to see was better for our customers and better for us, right? So that was the beginning of our journey sort of away from what I might call traditional Agile. 1993, this was what a phone looked like, right? I never had one of those, but that's what they look like. This was invented in 1993. Did you know that? Around that time? It's aging. It's been very, very important in our field, but it is aging, right? You don't give someone a phone, that looks like this anymore. I don't like to give people a process that looks like this. I don't. I think it's antiquated. Okay? I understand if you're still attached to it, but frankly, we've moved on. Now people say, wait a minute, Josh, wait a minute. You've been doing this a really long time. You're an expert, and you're telling us to do this modern Agile stuff. We need training wheels. And Scrum is our training wheels. And I say, you know what? You're right. Scrum is training wheels. Let's look at how training wheels work. Here's a dad in our local park. See the training wheels are on here. And the guy had his tools with him, so he was really trying to get his daughter to actually ride the bike, and so he took the training wheels off. And here's our next little look at him. Now, of course, he's holding her, as fear that she's going to fall. So that was interesting. And where I live in Berkeley, California, you see a lot of these things. They're called push bikes. There are no pedals. They're very low to the ground. They're very safe. 2-year-olds are on them these days. I literally see tiny little kids, 2-year-old, on these things. And they're just scooting around. And then they're lifting their legs up and they're kind of gliding. You know what they're doing? They're learning to balance. They're learning the critical skill of biking, which is actually balance on 2 wheels, instead of just pedaling randomly with training wheels on. I actually thought, let me try this on my youngest daughter. Okay, so this is a little video about Eva. This took place over 24 hours.
Oops. All right, you're okay. There's an old expression. When you fall off a bike, get back up on it.
I told her not to pedal.
Ready?
Just ignore the pedals.
I'm coming up only to hold you under, and coming up only to show you roll.
There's that poor guy.
And to know you is hard. We wonder. To know you all wrong. We were. Really too late to call, so we wait for morning to wake you is all we got. But to know me as hardly golden is to know me all wrong. They were at every occasion I'll be.
So that was Eva learning to ride her bike. And you know what? I had been that same old other parent before, because I found some photos from like years back with my other daughters where I did have the training wheels. And we did do it the old-fashioned way, right? So the thing was, I learned, I was open enough to try this new way. I didn't buy a push bike, but I just said, don't use those pedals. My point is that we need to get out of this old stuff, these old ideas. We need to be open-minded enough to try new ways of working, right? To basically look for better ways and better ways. The manifesto says that. We're uncovering better ways of working, right? So you got to be open-minded. I think this stuff here was very, very important to us, but I do think it's training wheels, and I think we need to look for the Agile push bike. And I'll be, I will tell you, I think modern Agile is our new Agile push bike. So I think some of the old stuff belongs in a senior living center. Okay, it's not a bad place. There's good food there. They have backlog bingo on Thursday nights, so it's fun as well. And let's retire this old stuff. Results over rituals. This is what we're after right now, right? Some would say outcomes over outputs. We want outcomes. We want really happy customers versus like tracking how many things we're getting done. And we want to focus on the results, not all these rituals. Everyone's saying, how do I do Agile? What are the rituals I'm supposed to do? The rituals aren't going to get you anywhere. It's focusing on the results. And Modern Agile is here to help you do that. These 4 principles. So this is Massimo Bottura. Anyone ever hear of him? Yes, some of you maybe watch chefs. There's a show about chefs on Netflix. He's a 3-star Michelin chef. He has a restaurant in northern Italy, and something happened one night. This is one of his dishes, camouflage. I mean, he's just an absolute incredible genius, of an artist, unbelievable, right? I find him to be incredibly inspiring. And one night, his sous chef messed up. It was sort of the end of the night, and they were going to serve some dessert. They were going to serve this lemon tart dish. Lemon tart's very, very fragile. There were 2 of them for a couple of guests. One of the lemon tarts dropped, fell on the side of the plate and the counter, and shattered. Taka wanted to just, I mean, this is a professional in a 3-star Michelin chef restaurant. He was mortified. And then Massimo tells the story of what happened next.
I said, Taka, stop, stop. Look through my fingers. That is beautiful. Let's rebuild as it's a broken stuff. Immediately didn't understand, but he trusts me so much. And he said, okay, let's try. So we get the lemon zabaione and we spread it on the plate. We just like this, you know, like, and then we rebuild on the other plate with all this single precision to make them feel we did that for purpose. That was the moment in which we create, oops, I dropped the lemon tart.
This became an iconic dish of the restaurant. They literally now serve it on a plate that looks broken, right? And it's just everyone wants this. Absolutely incredible. Let's analyze what happened here. First, right? They basically were forced to experiment with a new dish right on the spot, right? Experiment and learn rapidly. They needed to deliver quickly because they're not going to make their diners wait. They're not going to say, well, hold on, we're going to cook a new lemon tart. It's going to take about 45 minutes. No, let's find a way to deliver value continuously. What's it like to work in Massimo's kitchen, right? First of all, they made the people eating that an incredible dish, this broken tart dish. But for Massimo, what does he feel like? First, he's mortified. He made this horrible mistake, and Massimo turns it into a piece of art. I mean, that's insane, right? We talk about make people awesome, both the customers and our coworkers. It's a safe place to work. Your next mistake might turn into the next iconic dish in Massimo's restaurant, right? It's incredible. So, make people awesome. Let's get deeper into this. I was inspired by Kathy Sierra. She gives talks on this stuff. She has blogs about it. And she wrote the book Badass, Making Users Awesome, where she talks very clearly about the fact that a lot of companies focus on making an awesome team or making an awesome product. And she says that's all wrong. You really need to focus on making an awesome user. If you make a camera, right, and you're saying, I'm going to make the best camera in the world, that's the wrong focus, according to Kathy. She says, nope, you're going to try to make the best photographer, not the best camera. That's a very subtle but important difference, focusing on the end user, right? Understanding the end user, spending time with the end user to really understand what they need. So Make People Awesome is inspired by this, but it goes beyond just the user. Again, we also talk about our coworkers like Taka, right? In my journeys around the industry selling our e-learning and getting folks to try it and use it, I've discovered there's a whole ecosystem of people that we have to make awesome. There are people that buy our e-learning. There are people that evaluate it. There are people that sell it. There's all kinds of folks. How do we make them awesome? The bullet train. The bullet train is an incredible thing. In 1964, a train left Tokyo traveling at 120 miles per hour. That was unheard of. Back in the mid-1950s, they said, we need faster trains. We're recovering from World War II. We need faster trains. They said, how fast? And they initially thought, well, what if we get it to 70 or 80 miles an hour? And they said, no. We want 120 miles an hour. And that seemed impossible. They said, if it goes around a curve, the train will jump its tracks. And the person who was the head of the railway division said, why is there a curve? Think differently. Create create this awesome thing, and they had no idea how they'd do it. Make people awesome can really expand your horizons, right? Way beyond where you were. Jack Welch, CEO of General Electric, came to Japan in the early 1990s, heard about the bullet train story, and said, wow, you know what we've been missing at General Electric? Bullet train thinking. And he came back and said to every division, all 5 divisions of General Electric, what's your bullet train thinking? What are you going after that's so incredible, you have no idea how you're going to get there? Now, back to my family life. My daughter there, Eva, wanted a water balloon fight at her 8th birthday party. Water balloons. I'm like, oh, God, I got to make all the water balloons? Because that's a lot of work, right? You got to fill up all the water. You got to tie each little balloon. I was not really keen to do it, but she wanted it, and I said, sure, we'll do it. And I was just dreading having to make all those water balloons until I found something that made me awesome. It was this.
Modern water balloon technology.
Look at the top one. Show it. Show it.
Can take more.
I went a little too far there. The product wasn't perfect. Like I couldn't get the water to stop coming out there. I knew no matter how hard I put that on, and you don't know when to stop. So, but overall, wow, I made about 200 water balloons in about maybe a minute and a half. I mean, it was incredible, absolutely incredible. Someone decided to make makers of water balloons awesome, and I loved it. She had a great time at her party. Make safety a prerequisite. If you have a culture of fear, none of the fancy practices or processes that you're trying to implement are going to get you anywhere. They're just not going to help, right? Cultures of fear where people are afraid to make changes to the code, where people are afraid to speak up and disagree, where people are afraid to do anything that could impact their job. These are not high-performance environments. These are not places where you're basically creating awesome products. The culture, so no matter what agile process you decide to use, if you have a culture of fear, you got a problem. And that's why we say make safety a prerequisite. That is a focus that you need to spend time on, understand it. Toy Story 2. Anyone ever see that movie, Toy Story 2? Yeah, it actually did better than Toy Story 1, which is unheard of. It made more money, and that's very rare for a second release. You want to know what happened to Toy Story 2? It almost didn't exist. Pixar is like, I could walk to Pixar from my office. Pixar had a problem. Someone deleted a drive, all contents of the drive. That drive happened to have all of the digital artifacts for Toy Story 2. Oops. Then they said, well, okay, let's go to the backups. Turns out the backups were not working. Toy Story 2 was gone. You're talking about, many, many, many people spending years building this thing up, and it was gone. This is late 1990s. It turned out, though, that there was a new mom, right? And she was working from home a lot with her baby, and she was taking backups of Toy Story 2 on her personal computer. So they basically rushed to her house, got the computer, wrapped it in blankets, brought it back to Pixar, and they recovered the. But what happened as a result of that was no one was fired, no one was retrained. It was basically they said, okay, well we're going to just, be safer now. We're going to make it really hard to delete a whole drive. We're going to make sure our backups work. We're going to have better ways of protecting all these important assets. That's what their reaction was. They didn't hurt any. They didn't, penalize anyone or fire anyone. Google is famous for having done this study, Project Aristotle, where they discovered that high-performance teams at Google have psychological safety. The number one factor for high performance at Google is psychological safety. What does that mean? I think it means a lot of things, but I like to start with safe meetings. Encourage everyone to contribute, listen to one another, review, repeat people's points, avoid dominating or interrupting, and be caring, curious, and non-judgmental. Meaning, if someone says something that you don't like, approach it from a curiosity perspective. Be curious about this thing rather than angry. Be non-judgmental to start off with. Maybe they had a bad night. These 5 things are what we're recommending is a starting point for establishing psychological safety. Really quick story about Pixar. Pixar had a giant table, really long table in an important room where they would meet to have discussions about movies. Because it was so long, people couldn't hear each other at either ends. And so the people that really needed to talk to each other, for sure, the director and the producer and some of the CTOs and CEOs of the company were all sitting in the middle all the time, even with name tags. The name tags were placed there so that they would get those seats. Everyone else would filter in and get other seats, and then if there was really a lot, people would be standing. As a result of this, a lot of people never spoke because they were at the far ends of the room and they didn't feel like they could speak because no one would hear them. It was a really long table. Steve Jobs commissioned it. He loved this designer. And this long table stood there in Pixar for 10 years. 10 years of actually stifling creativity and collaboration because people wouldn't talk. And once they started to realize this, they had a meeting in another room and they sat around like a square table and everyone was on equal footing and there was more people could see each other better. They talked to each other. It was far more engaging. And they realized, oh my God, that table is a disaster. Get rid of it. Right? Encourage everyone to contribute, listen to one another, and all of these steps help to establish psychological safety. Safety is a prerequisite. We think you can't be very effective without it. When we build software, we build tons and tons of automated tests. We actually make that easy by doing test-driven development. When the Golden Gate Bridge was being built and were building the roadway underneath it, they did something unheard of, never been done before in a bridge project. They built a $130,000 net that went under the roadway and caught people if they fell. That actually made them much more efficient in building the bridge, the roadway. Safety is a prerequisite for high performance. Tailboarding is something we do in our environment. So anytime we're about to work on something, we say, hey, what are the risks? What are the potential hazards? What could happen when we're working on this? Let's talk about them. Right? And I've adopted this from other fields that are not software fields. They're fields that are even more terrifying to folks. Electricians and people that go out on the streets and change wires and stuff, they do tailboarding. They basically look for all the local hazards that can mess them up before they engage in new work. Stop work authority cards, right? We talk about Toyota all the time. Everyone brings up the andon cord. Well, do you have those ropes above your desk? Anyone here have a rope above their desk they can pull? No? Okay, well, I don't either, but what I've created is stop work authority cards. The stop work authority card is given to every person that works at my company, and they can flash this at any time to stop anything that they find to be unsafe. We even have an electronic version for our Slack channel, so they can Slack this to people. They've called this on me, and I've used it on them to stop unsafe activity, right? Often, that's around the psychological safety, where something wasn't too safe. I have a few of these cards if anyone wants them after the talk. Bill Taylor said this, in a hyper-competitive and in a world of hyper-competitive and non-stop disruption, playing it safe is the riskiest course of all. So make safety a prerequisite does not mean living in a cave. You have to take risks. It's actually vital to take risks, and it's unsafe not to take risks. They just have to be safe risks. Experiment and learn rapidly. I love this guy, Chris Rock. He's hysterical. You know what he does? When he does those big, tours that are just hysterically funny, it starts out in a small club in New Jersey near his home. He has a yellow pad of paper, and he tries out joke after joke. And some jokes work, and some jokes fall flat. And he's literally not doing his normal kind of, crazy stuff with his body and his hands where he's really animated. He's just stationary, sitting on a chair, and he's trying jokes, just to sort of learn, right? This is from a book called Little Bets, where he talks about this, and it's from an interview with Chris Rock. So he does many of these shows, little tiny bets, constantly testing, experimenting with new jokes before he builds his real show for the big stage. This is something that Linda Rising recommends. She calls it continuous retrospectives, right? What you're seeing there is a daily retrospective where people are just putting Post-it notes for things that are working well and things that need improvement, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Instead of waiting for the end of a sprint to do them, they're doing it all along the way, right? Continuous retrospective. Things are becoming more and more continuous. Here's a story. So this was interesting. IMVU, that's the company that Eric Ries created after his first company sort of cratered, right? And with IMVU, he said, we're doing things different. We're going to use these lean concepts. And they built this 3D world where people could talk to each other. And it was getting popular. More and more folks were in there using it. But then people started to say, we want to move our characters. We want to be able to move around in 3D space, kind of like The Sims. And they were like, ooh, that's expensive. We don't know if we can do that. So they started looking into it. They're like, yeah, it's going to take like 3 months of programming. And they didn't really feel like they could afford that. So someone said, well, why don't we just try something? We'll experiment. What if you just click somewhere and it just takes you there? We'll call it teleportation. And they're like, well, that's easy. I mean, they programmed it in 2 days. They put it out, and people were delighted. It was unbelievable. Here's what it looked like. This is the environment. Some furniture is going to show up. And then if you just want to sit down, you click, and you can move yourself around simply by clicking. It seems really primitive. They thought it was never going to fly. But when they asked people repeatedly, what are your top 3 things that you love about IMVU, one of those was teleportation. Again and again, people would say the teleportation feature. It's even better than The Sims, someone said. What? 2 days instead of 3 months. This is the kind of thing we need to be doing instead of taking stuff off a backlog and just doing it blindly and not even thinking about the options, right? The cheap, fast, quick options that may delight customers. We need to be experimenting and learning rapidly. This guy here, who has a Fire phone? Anyone with an Amazon Fire phone? Oh my God, no one has one. It was a total flop, an absolute incredible flop. They messed up completely. And some journalist said to Jeff Bezos, what happened, Jeff? You're such a hot shot. You know what he said? He said this: we're working on much bigger failures. He said, we in fact are proud of being one of the best places in the world to fail. We have an environment that runs like a venture capital fund. We fund all these different things, and we don't expect many of them to work, but if a few do, they're going to pay for all the failures. That's how they do things. Experimenting and learning. Failing is considered perfectly normal at Amazon. Deliver value continuously. I was inspired in 2007 when Timothy Fitz gave a speech called Doing the Impossible 50 Times a Day. And it was about IMVU, the same place where Eric Ries did the Lean Startup, releasing 50 times a day on average to millions of users without interrupting them and in a very safe way. Doing the impossible 50 times a day. I was so inspired, said, we got to do this. Even though we were releasing once or twice a week at that point, we said, let's move ourselves to continuous deployment so we can experience what that's like. Make it safe to deploy. One of the things we discovered in doing this in our shop was that our stress went down. When we could deliver to production at any time of day, it was just not stressful anymore. We never had to say, okay, Wednesday afternoon, we're going to put everything together and make sure it's all ready and get it out there. Didn't have to do that anymore. And it actually didn't take long for us to get from CI, continuous integration, to CD. It was about 3 weeks of work. Yahoo went through an incredible transformation. We were partly involved in this, where they went from a very primitive environment to a continuous deployment environment. They did this. They trained all of their QAs to become QEs, quality engineers, which means that they write a little bit of test code instead of just recording scripts. Then they moved from sprints to continuous flow as they started to have more and more automated tests around. They felt free to do that then. And from there, they moved into continuous deployment. They moved from manual builds, really primitive, to CI and finally continuous deployment. And this they did across all of their shipping products. Everything that gets changed at any given quarter, if code gets changed in that quarter, Well, that qualified it for being something that's still alive and being changed, and then they made it continuous deployable. Some really quick case studies. This guy here was a liberal arts major. He studied software development to get a job after school. And he worked for a social gaming company. And at the social gaming company, they said, hey, Miles, we want you to build this new feature. Work by yourself. And he did. So he'd write code. And the code had to populate a new database table, right? That wasn't being used in the production game yet. But at that particular company, they did something really crazy. They didn't have a database for the developers. You used the production database. So here's Miles, a relatively new programmer, writing new code and having it populate a brand new table in production. So Miles would write the code, look at the table, and say, oh, that's not the right contents. He would use a little tool to delete the contents of the table in production. One day, when he was a little sleepy after lunch, he deleted the user table. Oh my God. All hell broke loose, and it was a disaster. Similar to Pixar, their backups weren't working. So maybe one of the tips you're going to get from this talk is check your damn backups after this talk. Do they actually work? The backups weren't working. The CEO called Miles into the conference room and said this. And Miles felt absolutely horrible, right? This is not Massimo Bottura saying, it's beautiful. This was a bad situation. They actually had to call the customers and say, what did you buy last month? Because we got to enter it back into the system. It was just disaster. Never place a worker only one defense away from failure. There are absolute gurus in the field of safety. They're not in the software field. They're in the field of safety. These folks apply safety to all kinds of industries, right? Todd Conklin's one of them. He wrote a book called Pre-Accident Investigations. Really fascinating book. Never place a worker only one defense away from failure. Poor Miles was really in a bad way. So basically, he was experimenting in production. Yep, sure. Experimenting, learning rapidly. We got that. Delivering value, I guess, to production. But my God, he wasn't making anyone awesome. And boy, was it not a safe place to work, right? Not at all. Etsy had a site outage, right? Etsy, marketplace for crafts and services. This did not happen at Etsy. This doesn't happen at Etsy. Etsy is not a blame culture. People don't sit there blaming each other when things go wrong, right? This happened because a new engineer, 7 days on the job, deployed something. He actually deleted a CSS file, and it caused the site outage. Oh my God, how'd that happen? Seth Godin said this, we're not afraid of failure, we're afraid of blame. But at Etsy, they practice what they call a blameless culture, a just culture. They hold blameless retrospectives there, and they're very serious about it. They are blameless. This guy won the 3-arm sweater award, the guy that caused the site outage. He won the award. It's a 3-arm sweater. It's like, oops, I accidentally built a 3rd arm for my sweater. It's given once a year to the most spectacular failure from which they learn the most. And they learned a ton from this. They said, shame on us for having a code base that can go down just because you delete a file. Right? Thanks for exposing that to us. And welcome to Etsy. So basically, he was delivering value. He was experimenting with deleting this file, which he thought wasn't actually being used. Turns out it was. And it basically was not too safe. The continuous deployment pipeline allowed this to happen. So there's some work to be done to make it a safer architecture. But he was safe to fail, very safe to fail. And Etsy made him awesome by saying it's OK. Thank you for exposing this flaw. OK, Hunter Industries, they make lawn watering devices, okay? So a hardware type product with software embedded. And they do something called mob programming. This is how they work in a safe way. Everyone gathers around various monitors, and they program together all day long like this. This is how what they've evolved to and experimented with. They love this. People change who's at the keyboard and mouse every 15 minutes. Everyone's giving input about what to actually do. And boy, have they seen it. It is very, very safe. They don't make many mistakes. People's skills climb very, very quickly in that environment. And the company's delighted with the results. They've been expanding to more and more mob programming teams. So I think I'll skip this analysis and just, in the interest of time, Airbnb. Airbnb, how serious are they about continuous deployment there? How quickly do you think it takes a new employee to deploy code at Airbnb? Any guesses? 10 minutes, okay. It's actually 2 days. Within 2 days of first being an employee at Airbnb, you will have deployed either a bug fix or a tiny little new feature into production by yourself with a mentor's help, right? They'll give you the environment to have a fully functioning environment that can deploy to production, and then you got to go do the work. And this is part of their onboarding, right? They take it that seriously. That part of the onboarding is you're going to deploy to production. Experience that pipeline, experience what that's like, right? That's Etsy. So they make you awesome by showing you that this is what we do around here at Etsy. The concept from concept to cash, from hypothesis to happiness, they're focused on that being a very short cycle. They allow folks to experiment this way and so on. I'm running out of time, so I want to get to this, the manifesto. The manifesto for Agile software development. We started talking about this early in the speech, right? And I noted that things have changed. It's 2001 was when the manifesto for Agile software development was written, and here we are in 2016. And I believe things have changed a lot. So here's what it said: customer collaboration over contract negotiation. I propose that we start to think about making people awesome rather than just customer collaboration. Let's make our customers awesome. Let's make our coworkers awesome. Working software over comprehensive documentation. Working software was really important and still is really important. But we say today, deliver value continuously. Again, this is not just about software development, right? Responding to change over following a plan, right? Waterfall is not very good about responding to change. They wanted everything nailed down, and that's why this was written. Much more adaptive and being responsive. And we now say, okay, yes, not only do we expect change, we're going to make change. We're going to experiment constantly and learn constantly, right? And finally, in individuals and interactions over processes and tools, individuals and interactions are important, right? I think in Agile, tools have dominated. Everyone thinks to do Agile, you need some giant new tool. That's a big problem. But individuals and interactions still very important, right? But what's the quality of those interactions? What are those like? We think that they should be about safety, right? That the safety of those interactions and the safety of our interactions with our customers, with ourselves, that's the critical thing, right? So these four quadrants of the manifesto for Agile software development, I'm saying they were very valuable. They still are valuable. There's wisdom in there, especially in the 12 principles that are listed. But I like to let these 4 principles guide us, right? The 4 principles of modern Agile. These are guiding principles, right? We look at these and say, what behaviors can we implement to practice those principles, right? Rather than working from rituals first and learning rituals and then trying to be Agile, work backwards from what are the principles and what behaviors can we implement to practice those principles. To learn more, you can go to modernagile.org. We've been building up that site slowly but surely, and there's information there. There's videos and there's articles you can look and books that I've mentioned today. There's some social groups. We have a Slack community and a Facebook community that are pretty active. And I've been making a show lately on YouTube. It's called The Modern Agile Show. If you search on hashtag Modern Agile Show, you'll find it. So that's a fun place and answering some questions up there. And I think, let's see, we have some Q&A time. Thank you, everyone.